Hey, I'm out here at Homestead Miami Speedway for Clash Miami. I have an official fire suit on. I'm in the FLO Wheel Pit for the pro races. If anyone has any issues, they come in, they can swap their wheel out for a FLO wheel. We're going to talk about a couple things here today on a unique course like this, which is the Speedway. We're going to talk about the surface conditions, setting tire pressure. We're going to talk about tire size and tire width. Also, we'll touch on some aerodynamics, so let's check it out. What you're going to see here is the track. So this is the track that the athletes go around. Pretty crazy bank on the other side there. What's really unique about this course is it's a Nascar course, so the pavement itself is actually medium to almost rough. It's got a pretty interesting texture. I'll show it to you here in a minute. In this far south, what we can get though is a very extreme temperature. So you can go up to 136 degrees on this track temperature. We had a gun on this the other day and it's 136 degrees. So as a rule of thumb, remember, for every 10 degrees, you're going to increase your tire pressure by about 2%. So it's very, very important that when you're setting up for a race like this, that you're either accounting for that or you're setting up in a temperature that is similar. Sometimes it's not possible. So how do you adjust for that? If you can get to the temperature, we always recommend inflating outside, not in like a cold hotel room or something like that. But if you are outside and you know that it's going to get hotter by the time you're on the course, you can do the math and you can basically pressure down some. That's why something like the new FLO Air Gauge is really beneficial for something like this. You can get very accurate tire pressures, ensuring that you are not going to overinflate for a race like this. This here is the actual surface that you're going to look at. Now I'm going to put my hand down here so you can kind of get a scale for what this looks like. But you can see how there's actually quite a few pieces of aggregate that are in here that are exposed. Now, part of the reason for that is because, again, this is a NASCAR track. So as cars are coming through these corners at very high speeds, they do need some sort of durability on this track, some sort of roughness to make sure that they're going to hold those corners. For an athlete like yourself, that's going to become important because the rougher you get, the lower you're going to want to manage that tire pressure. So it's important to adjust your tire pressure for these tracks. Now, if you're wondering, how do you set your tire pressure based on temperature? Is it air temperature or surface temperature? Great question. So one thing we always recommend is that before you inflate your tires, if you can go out and you can make a few laps, what that's going to do is it's going to warm up the rubber on your tires. It's going to get you closer to the actual consistency that you're going to be when you're racing. Now, second thing you want to consider is your tires are actually making contact with the surface of the road. So they will warm up and it's going to be closer to the temperature of the track as it is to the air. So it's not exact, but it is closer. So make sure you adjust based on the road surface temperature, not always just the air temperature. We have 3 FLO wheels here, all with different size Continental GP 5000s. This is a 25mm tire, a 28mm tire, and a 32mm tire. Now, it is important to know that when you're riding a course like this, you want to size your tire appropriately. So, when you're looking at tire size at a course like this, I'm going to get right down here on the pavement so you can see it. It is very rough based on the tires for NASCAR and to be able to hold these banks. Now, from a tri perspective, you're going to want to get the widest tire that's going to fit your frame. It's important because some tires are too wide for certain frames, so you want to get the largest tire that you can that will fit your frame. Now, for a FLO wheel, 28s are optimized aerodynamically. You can get away with 32s, but on a course like this, rolling resistance becomes very important because of the roughness of the surface. So remember, on a course like this, you're going to want to have your tire pressure set low enough so that you're going over the bumps as opposed to bouncing over them. So all those small pieces of aggregate, you don't want to bounce up and down. That's taking your watts that you're putting into the pedals and moving you up and down as opposed to moving you forward. Now, the best way to do that is to have a lower tire pressure, but the lower the tire pressure gets, the larger the contact patch gets. When you have a narrow tire, like a 25mm tire, what happens is your contact patch gets longer and longer and longer under the tire, and it has some width to it, but not as much as a 32. A 32, because of its width, allows you to have a shorter contact patch and a wider contact patch. The area is the same underneath, but it changes the shape. Now, a long contact patch like that causes issues because it's harder to roll over that contact patch. Think of a moment. If you're standing on your toes, it's a lot easier to push you over than it is if you have skis on your feet. So we want to make that contact patch as short as possible to help with rolling resistance. When you look at a wheel like this on the ground, you can see a smaller 25mm tire as it rolls is going to have to go over those bumps, that aggregate in the pavement. When you have a larger tire like a 32, you can see that it makes it easier to go over the aggregate in the pavement. What about aerodynamics in a course like this? Well, what's interesting about this is it's basically like a giant velodrome, and you have a complete loop. So what's unique is that because the walls are banked, as I look around here, you can see this. There is airflow in here, but in certain areas it's going to be a lot quieter and a lot stiller than you would have if you were out on the open road. The other thing you want to consider is that if there is airflow, in one direction you may be in a headwind, in the other direction you're in tailwind, so it kind of balances itself out. Now, aerodynamics are still very important in a race like this. I'm not saying that they're not. They're incredibly important. But you also definitely want to take into consideration heavily rolling resistance because of the unique aerodynamic situation that you see in a course like this. All right, let's do a quick recap. So, in a course like this, make sure that you're getting out early, setting your tire pressures, maybe with a lap or two, so that you're accounting for the temperature, and make sure you understand what the temperature can be later in the day when you're actually racing. 2, because of the surface like this that it is rougher, we have some aggregate that's exposed, we're going to want to make sure that we're going to have a tire size that is wide enough that's going to allow you to get low enough pressures where you're optimized around the rolling resistance. What's really great about this is that it's very well taken care of, so you're not going to hit something like a pothole. You can get those lower pressures to make sure that you're optimized for that. Again, aerodynamically, it's very important, still very important in something like this, but let's focus a little bit more on the rolling resistance here because of the course and how unique it is. And let's not make the tires too wide so that you're blowing out the aerodynamics of your wheels. But let's make sure you're using, being smart about it, and you're going to optimize for both aerodynamics and rolling resistance. If you have questions about this, please feel free to reach out. We have tire pressure charts and everything here. We can help you get set up with the right pressures for a course like Homestead Miami at the Speedway or Daytona later in the year.